It wasn't the rejection that shattered the pack's spirit. It was her silence. When Liam O'Connor, the alpha everyone feared, stood before the full gathering and severed the mate bond, he expected tears. He expected pleading. He expected Audrey Miller to fall to her knees and break. But Audrey didn't scream. She didn't fight. She simply nodded, turned her back on the only life she had ever known, and walked away. The entire hall fell into a dead, breathless silence. They thought that was the end of her story. They were wrong. Because 5 years later, when Alpha King Sebastian Cross walked into a room and saw someone touch her, he didn't just get angry. He lost control, and the world was about to burn for it. The rain in the Pacific Northwest always felt like a living thing. Tonight, it hammered against the stained glass windows of the Blackwood Pack house, a furious drumbeat drowning out the anxious murmurs of the 300 wolves crammed into the grand hall. Audrey Miller stood near the back, her hands clasped tightly in front of her simple gray dress. The fabric was worn, fraying slightly at the hem, a stark, silent contrast to the velvet and silk that adorned the high-ranking members of the pack. At 21, she was the daughter of a fallen Gamma, an orphan who had scrubbed the floors of this hall more times than she had ever danced across them. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was the mating moon. Her wolf, a quiet and observant creature, stirred restlessly within her. "He is coming," it whispered. The heavy oak doors at the front groaned open. The room hushed. Liam O'Connor entered. He was the newly confirmed alpha of the Blackwood Pack, a man carved from granite and raw ambition. His shoulders were broad, straining the seams of his tailored suit, his dark hair swept back and glistening from the rain. He didn't look like a lover arriving for a ceremony. He looked like a king presiding over an execution. Beside him walked Jessica Price. She was everything Audrey was not, the daughter of a wealthy beta, loud, fierce, and draped in a crimson gown that likely cost more than Audrey would see in a lifetime. Jessica's arm was looped possessively through Liam's, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. Audrey's breath caught. The bond, that invisible, magnetic thread that fate uses to tether souls, snapped taut the moment Liam's eyes found hers across the crowded room. She felt the heat of it, the undeniable, primal confirmation. "He is mine." But Liam's eyes held no warmth. Only a cold, calculated resolve. He marched to the dais, Jessica clinging to his side, and raised a hand. The last whispers died. "My family." Liam's voice boomed, echoing off the ancient rafters. "Tonight is a night of celebration. We solidify our future. We strengthen our bloodline." Audrey took a tentative step forward. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "He knows. He feels it too." Liam's gaze locked directly onto hers. He did not flinch. "As Alpha, my first duty is to the strength of this pack. Weakness is a luxury we cannot afford. The moon goddess sometimes tests us with matches that do not suit our station." The air was sucked from the room. Every head turned toward Audrey. She froze, the blood draining from her face. "Audrey Miller," Liam said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "I, Liam O'Connor, alpha of the Blackwood Pack, reject you as my mate." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A shocked gasp rippled through the crowd. Rejections happened, but rarely so publicly, and never with such brutal, clinical indifference. This was a spectacle, a demonstration that his ambition was stronger than fate itself. "I choose Jessica Price to be my Luna," Liam continued, grabbing Jessica's hand and thrusting it high. "She brings wealth, status, and the strength of the Beta bloodline. She is our future." Jessica beamed, looking down at Audrey with triumphant pity. The pain hit Audrey a heartbeat later. It was a physical blow to the chest, a visceral tearing deep in her soul that made her knees threaten to buckle. Her wolf howled in silent agony, curling into a wounded ball in the recesses of her mind. The bond was fracturing, the connection withering like a vine in frost. Every eye in the room was on her. They were waiting for the breakdown, for the orphan girl to cry, to scream, to beg the alpha to reconsider. Jessica was already smirking, preparing a cruel remark. Liam stood with his chest puffed out, ready to command her to leave. But Audrey did none of those things. She closed her eyes for a single, steadying breath, inhaling the scent of rain, timber, and betrayal. She thought of the years spent serving, the ridicule endured, the fragile hope she'd secretly nursed, that her mate would be her savior. He is not a savior, she realized with a clarity that cut cleaner than the pain. He is just a man. A weak, small man. Audrey opened her eyes. They were dry. She straightened her spine, smoothing the worn fabric of her dress with calm hands. She lifted her chin, exposing her neck, not in submission, but in final, graceful defiance. "I, Audrey Miller," she said. Her voice was not loud, but in the dead silence, it carried to every dark corner of the hall. It was steady, unwavering. Liam blinked, his brow furrowing. He hadn't expected her to speak. "I accept your rejection, Liam O'Connor." The silence that followed was heavier than the rejection itself. It was stunned, suffocating. Her composure was an insult to his ego, a mirror reflecting his own pettiness. Audrey didn't look at the gawking crowd. She looked only at Liam. "May you find the happiness you believe you deserve." It was a curse, wrapped in perfect politeness. Then, she turned her back on him. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, wolves stepping back not in disgust, but in a confused, dawning respect. She walked toward the heavy oak doors, the decisive click of her sensible heels the only sound in the cavernous room. "Audrey!" Liam barked, his voice cracking with sudden, irrational anger. "Where do you think you're going?" Audrey paused at the threshold. She did not turn back. "I am no longer a member of the Blackwood Pack, Alpha," she said, her tone chillingly calm. "I am Rogue, and I am leaving." She pushed the doors open and walked out into the torrential rain. She did not run. She walked. And as the doors swung shut behind her, sealing away the life she'd known, the pack remained utterly silent. The image of her straight back, unbent and unbroken, was seared into their collective memory. Liam stood on the dais, Jessica's hand in his grasp. But for the first time in his life, the Alpha felt small. Seattle was a city that understood the art of hiding. The constant gray drizzle, the forest of umbrellas, the masses of people rushing with their heads down. It was the perfect place for a wolf without a pack to disappear. Audrey adjusted the strap of her leather satchel and hurried down 4th Avenue. At 26, she was a world apart from the girl who had walked out of the Blackwood Pack house. Her once mousy brown hair was now a sharp, chic bob. Her clothes were impeccably tailored, a beige trench coat over a navy business suit. She was no longer Audrey the orphan. She was Audrey Miller, the youngest senior architect at Sterling Finch. She checked her watch. 8:15 a.m. She was meeting a new client today, a massive, private contract that could make or break her entire year. The firm had been unusually vague, stating only that the client was an international investor seeking to build a sprawling, private estate deep in the Cascades. Audrey entered the sleek high-rise, shaking the rain from her umbrella. The lobby smelled of expensive coffee and lemon-scented floor wax. She badged in and took the elevator to the 40th floor. Audrey, thank God, her boss, Mr. Henderson, hissed the moment she stepped off the elevator. He was a perpetually frantic human, already sweating. "He's early. He's already in the conference room. He does not like to be kept waiting." "I'm 15 minutes early, Dave," Audrey said calmly, handing her coat to the receptionist. "Who is he?" "A Mr. Cross. Sebastian Cross. Private equity, tech, real estate, nobody really knows. Just that he has more money than God and a temper to match. Don't screw this up." Audrey paused. Cross. The name tugged at the edge of her memory, familiar yet unplaceable. She took a deep, centering breath, smoothing her suit jacket. Inside her, her wolf, usually dormant these days, a quiet passenger in her human life, pricked its ears. It hadn't stirred like this in years. "Danger?" She asked it silently. No, came the instinctive, visceral reply. "Power." Audrey smoothed her blazer and opened the glass door to conference room B. The man standing by the window turned around. Audrey stopped. Her folder almost slipped from her fingers. He was massive. That was the first thing her instincts registered. He stood well over 6 feet 4 inches, wearing a charcoal suit that struggled to contain the width of his shoulders. He had dark, almost black hair and a neatly trimmed beard. But it was his eyes that froze her. They were amber gold, really. Wolf eyes. He wasn't human. Audrey's heart hammered, but she forced her face to remain neutral. She had spent 5 years pretending to be human, masking her scent with high-end perfumes and suppressants. She was good at this. "Mr. Cross," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Audrey Miller. I'll be leading the design on your project." Sebastian Cross looked at her hand, then up to her eyes. He didn't move for a long moment. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring slightly. He smelled like cedar storm clouds and something ancient. "Miller," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. He took her hand. His skin was scorching hot. When their skin touched, a jolt of static electricity snapped between them loud enough to be heard. Audrey pulled her hand back reflexively. "Sorry, the carpet is static prone." Sebastian didn't smile. He watched her with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only thing in the room. "Interesting," he murmured. "I was told this firm was human-run." Audrey went cold. "It is." And yet, Sebastian took a step closer, invading her personal space. "You are not." Audrey stiffened. She looked at the glass walls. The office staff was bustling outside, oblivious. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Cross. Shall we sit?" Sebastian chuckled a dark, rich sound. He pulled out a chair, not for himself, but for her. "Please sit." Audrey sat, trying to regain control of the meeting. She opened her folder. "Mr. Henderson tells me you're looking for a secluded estate, something defensible, private." "I need a sanctuary," Sebastian said, sitting opposite her. He leaned back, watching her every movement. "My family is large, and we value privacy above all else. I require a structure that can withstand force, yet looks like a home. Concrete reinforcements." Then Audrey said, sketching on her notepad, "Ballistic glass underground secure wings." "Precisely," Sebastian said. "You understand the need for security, don't you?" "Audrey?" He used her first name. It sounded intimate on his tongue. "I live in the city, Mr. Cross." "Security is always a concern," she deflected. "You have no pack scent," Sebastian observed, dropping the pretense of discussing architecture. "You smell of nothing but vanilla perfume and loneliness. You are a rogue." Audrey slammed her pen down. "Mr. Cross, I am a professional architect. If you are here to discuss pack politics, I will have to ask you to leave. I left that life behind a long time ago." Sebastian's eyes narrowed, but there was no aggression in them. There was curiosity. "You walked away, or were you forced out?" "I chose to leave," Audrey said firmly. "Now about the foundation." "I'm hosting a gala," Sebastian interrupted. Audrey blinked. "Excuse me. A gala tonight at the Grand Fairmont. It's a networking event for the supernatural community in the tri-state area, a peace summit of sorts. I don't attend those events." "You should," Sebastian said. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a black envelope with gold lettering. He slid it across the marble table. "I need an architect who understands the unique needs of our kind, but I also need to see how you handle yourself among wolves. Consider it part of the interview." Audrey stared at the envelope. She knew what this was. It was a test. "And if I refuse, then I take my business elsewhere," Sebastian said simply. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "You have talent, Audrey. I can see it in your sketches. But I don't hire cowards." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. "Autopool. Dress formally. And Audrey. Yes. Don't wear the scent blocker tonight. It gives me a headache." He left before she could respond. Audrey sat alone in the conference room, her hands trembling. She reached for the envelope. The name Sebastian Cross was embossed on the front. She knew the rumors. Everyone knew the rumors. There was only one family with the surname Cross that held this much power. Sebastian wasn't just an alpha. He was the Alpha King of the Western Territories, the most dangerous wolf on the continent. And worse, as she stared at the invitation, her phone buzzed with a news alert from the local werewolf network she still secretly monitored. Breaking: Alpha Liam O'Connor of the Blackwood Pack arrives in Seattle for the King's Summit. Audrey closed her eyes. Liam was here. Jessica was here. And the Alpha King had just summoned her into the lion's den. She picked up the invitation. 5 years ago, she had walked away in silence. Tonight, she would have to face the noise. The Grand Fairmont Hotel ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. It smelled of expensive champagne roasted duck and the overwhelming musky scent of 500 wolves in one room. It was a scent of raw power, barely contained by silk ties and evening gowns. Audrey stood at the top of the marble staircase. Her heart was a frantic bird in her chest, but her face was a mask of cool porcelain. She had spent her entire savings on the dress. It was midnight blue silk strapless, hugging her curves before cascading down to the floor in a liquid pool of fabric. It was a far cry from the gray rags she had worn the night she was rejected. She wore no jewelry except for a simple silver hairpin. She didn't need it. The way she held her head high was decoration enough. "Do not run," she told herself. "You are not prey." She began her descent, heads turned. It started as a ripple near the stairs and spread outward. Wolves were creatures of instinct. They noticed when something changed in their environment. Audrey didn't smell like a pack member. She didn't smell like a rogue in the traditional dirty sense. She smelled clean, independent, and beneath the vanilla perfume she wore, there was the faint lingering trace of ozone and storms. The scent of the Alpha King left on her from their handshake that morning. That scent acted like a shield. Wolves stepped back as she reached the floor, their eyes widening. "Is that it? Can't be the Miller girl." The whispers hissed through the room. Audrey ignored them, walking toward the bar. She needed a drink before she could face the night. "Audrey." The voice stopped her cold. It wasn't the deep rumble of the king. It was a voice from her nightmares. She turned slowly. Liam O'Connor stood 5 feet away. He looked older than he had 5 years ago, heavier. The stress of running a pack had etched lines around his eyes, but he was still handsome in a rugged, predictable way. He was holding a glass of scotch, his knuckles white against the crystal. Beside him, Jessica Price, now Jessica O'Connor, froze. She was wearing red again, a tight, flashy number that showed too much skin. Her hand went instinctively to Liam's arm, her claws extending slightly to snag the fabric of his suit. "Hello, Liam," Audrey said, her voice didn't shake. "Jessica." Liam stared at her, his mouth slightly open. He looked her up and down, drinking in the sight of her. He was expecting the girl in the gray dress. He was expecting the servant. He wasn't expecting this woman who looked like she could buy and sell his entire pack. "You," Liam stammered. "What are you doing here?" "This is a summit for alpha bloodlines and dignitaries." "I was invited," Audrey said smoothly. "By who?" Jessica snapped, her eyes narrowing. "The catering staff." Audrey smiled. It was a cold, sharp thing. "Actually, I'm here on business. I'm an architect." "An architect?" Liam laughed, but it sounded breathless. "You scrub floors, Audrey. You don't build skyscrapers." "A lot changes in 5 years, Liam. For some of us, anyway." She glanced pointedly at his pack mark on his wrist. It looked faded, a sign that the Blackwood pack wasn't flourishing as well as he pretended. Liam took a step closer, invading her space. The scent of him, rain, and wet timber hit her. Once it had made her swoon, now it just smelled like damp rot. "You shouldn't be here." Liam lowered his voice. "It's dangerous. There are wolves here who would tear a rogue apart just for sport. I can handle myself." "You are always weak," Liam whispered, his eyes darkening. He reached out his fingers, brushing her bare shoulder. "You need protection. If you beg me, maybe I can find you a place in the servants' quarters again. For old time's sake." It was a power play. He was trying to put her back in the box, he remembered. Audrey flinched away from his touch, revulsion rising in her throat. "Don't touch me." "I am an alpha," Liam growled, his ego bruised by her rejection of his generosity. "You don't tell me what to do. You belong to the history of my pack. That makes you mine to command." "She is not yours to command, pup." The voice didn't come from the crowd. It seemed to come from the walls, the floor, the air itself. It was a baritone command that vibrated in the teeth of every wolf in the room. The music stopped instantly. The crowd parted. Sebastian Cross walked through the center of the ballroom. He looked like a god of war dressed for a funeral. His black tuxedo was impeccable, tailored to fit the massive expanse of his chest. He moved with a predatory grace that made Liam look like a clumsy boy. Sebastian stopped beside Audrey. He didn't look at her. He looked at Liam. Liam paused, taking a stumbling step back. He recognized the power. This was a king. King Sebastian. Liam choked out, bowing his head quickly. Jessica dipped into a frantic, clumsy curtsy. Alpha O'Connor, Sebastian said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning gold. I was under the impression that the Blackwood Pack taught its members manners. It seems I was mistaken. I was just greeting an old acquaintance, Liam stammered. She is a rogue, sir. I was warning her of the dangers. She is my guest. Sebastian cut him off. A gasp went through the room. Sebastian turned to Audrey. The hardness in his face vanished, replaced by a terrifying intensity. He held out his hand. Miss Miller, I believe you owe me a dance. Audrey looked at his hand. It was large, scarred, and dangerous. Then she looked at Liam, who was staring at her with a mixture of shock and jealous rage. She placed her hand in Sebastian's. I believe I do, Mr. Cross. The orchestra, sensing the shift in the room, began to play a slow, heavy waltz. Sebastian led Audrey to the center of the floor. His hand settled on her waist. It felt like a branding iron. The heat of him soaked through the silk of her dress, warming skin that had been cold for years. You look terrified, Sebastian murmured as he swept her into the turn. I'm surrounded by apex predators, Audrey replied, looking up at him. She had to crane her neck. He was massive, and I'm dancing with the most dangerous one of them all. Good, Sebastian said. Fear keeps you sharp. Why did you do that? Audrey asked. Save me from him. Sebastian spun her, his movement effortless. I didn't save you. You were handling him just fine. I merely accelerated his departure. He pulled her slightly closer. That was him, wasn't it? The one who rejected you. Audrey stiffened. How did you know? I saw the way he looked at you. Like a child who threw away a toy and now wants it back because someone else is playing with it. Sebastian's eyes flashed gold. He is a fool. Audrey felt a blush rise to her cheeks. He wanted a Luna with status. I was a nobody. And now I'm an architect who just wants to survive the night. You are more than that, Audrey, Sebastian whispered. He leaned down his lips, brushing her ear. My wolf has been pacing in my mind since you walked into my office this morning. Do you know why? Audrey's breath hitched. No. Because you don't smell like a rejection, he said, his voice dropping to a growl that sent shivers down her spine. You smell like potential. The song ended. Sebastian didn't let go immediately. He held her for a second longer than was proper, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin of her waist. Go get a drink, he said softly, stepping back. I have to speak to the council elders, but do not leave the ballroom. Stay where I can see you. It was a command, but it felt like a request. Audrey nodded and made her way toward the balcony doors. She needed fresh air. The intensity of Sebastian's gaze was overwhelming. Her own wolf was scratching at the surface, whining, wanting to go back to him. She stepped out onto the terrace. The Seattle rain had stopped, leaving the city lights shimmering below. She gripped the stone railing, taking deep breaths. What is happening? She thought. The Alpha King. It's impossible. You think you're special now, don't you? The voice came from the shadows of the terrace. Audrey spun around. Liam stepped out from behind a large potted fern. He had been drinking. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He wasn't the composed alpha anymore. He was a jealous ex-boyfriend with too much power. Liam, go back inside, Audrey said, backing up against the railing. He's playing with you. Liam sneered, stumbling toward her. The king doesn't mate with damaged goods. He's using you to humiliate me. That's all this is. Not everything is about you, Liam. Audrey snapped. Leave me alone. You're my mate, Liam roared suddenly, the sound cracking the air. I rejected you, yes, but I never severed the link fully. I can still feel it. I can feel you responding to him. He lunged. Audrey tried to dodge, but he was fast. He grabbed her upper arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. He yanked her toward him, his face inches from hers. He smelled of whiskey and desperation. "You don't get to be happy," Liam hissed. "You don't get to upgrade from me. Let her go." The voice didn't come from the door. It came from the balcony above. Before Liam could even look up, a dark shape dropped from the second-story ledge. It landed with a heavy thud between them, cracking the stone tiles of the terrace. Sebastian rose from a crouch. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo jacket anymore. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing the thick muscles of his neck. And his eyes were no longer human. They were glowing solid gold. His canines had extended. His hands were curled into claws. "Sebastian," Audrey breathed. Liam released Audrey instantly, backing away, his hands up. "Your Majesty," as she provoked me. I was just Sebastian didn't speak. He didn't posture. He moved with a speed that the eye couldn't track. 1 second he was 10 feet away. The next his hand was wrapped around Liam's throat, lifting the alpha of the Blackwood pack off the ground. Liam gagged his feet, kicking helplessly in the air. "I told you," Sebastian said, his voice a distorted demonic growl. "She is mine." The glass doors to the ballroom burst open. Dozens of wolves poured out, attracted by the scent of aggression. They froze when they saw the scene. The Alpha King, holding a visiting alpha by the throat over the edge of a 40-story balcony. "Sebastian, stop." Audrey screamed. She didn't care about Liam. But she knew what this meant. If he killed an alpha in cold blood at a peace summit, it was war. "Don't kill him." Sebastian turned his head slowly to look at her. The gold in his eyes was swirling chaotic. He was on the edge. The man was gone. The beast was in the driver's seat. "He touched you." Sebastian growled. "He hurt you." "He's nothing." Audrey stepped forward, reaching for Sebastian's free hand. "He is nothing to me. Don't make him something by destroying your kingdom for him." Sebastian looked at the terrified Liam, then back at Audrey's pleading face. The gold in his eyes flickered, fading slightly back to ABA. He threw Liam backward. Liam crashed into the stone wall, collapsing in a heap, gasping for air, clutching his bruised throat. Sebastian straightened his shirt, though his chest was heaving. He looked at the crowd of stunned onlookers. "Get him out of my city," Sebastian ordered, pointing at Liam. "If he is still in Seattle by sunrise, I will hunt him down, and I will not be as merciful." 2 guards rushed forward and dragged the sobbing Liam away. Jessica was nowhere to be seen. Sebastian turned to Audrey. The adrenaline was still rolling off him in waves. He looked terrifying. He looked magnificent. He reached out his thumb, gently, tracing the red marks Liam's fingers had left on her arm. A low, sorrowful whine escaped his throat. "I lost control," he whispered, sounding horrified. "I never lose control." Audrey looked up at him, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with a sudden, undeniable realization. "Why?" she asked softly. Sebastian closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against hers. "Because," he breathed, "I have waited 1,000 years for my mate, and I will burn the world before I let anyone touch her again." The pack went silent. The declaration had been made. Audrey Miller, the rejected orphan, was the true mate of the Alpha King, and the war for her heart had just begun. The silence in the armored limousine was deafening. Rain streaked against the bulletproof glass as the convoy of black SUVs tore through the streets of Seattle, heading toward the Space Needle where Sebastian's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors. Audrey sat on the plush leather seat, her hands trembling in her lap. Sebastian sat across from her, not touching her, but his amber eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that burned. "You're angry," Sebastian said. His voice was rough, the gravel of his wolf still lingering in his throat. "I'm not angry," Audrey whispered, looking out the window at the blurred city lights. "I'm overwhelmed. An hour ago, I was an architect with a deadline. Now, according to Twitter and the werewolf gossip sites, I'm the Cinderella of Seattle and the intended queen of the Western Territories. The media doesn't matter. It matters to me, Sebastian. I spent 5 years building a life where no one looked at me. I liked being invisible. You just put a spotlight on me that can be seen from space. Sebastian leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I couldn't let him touch you. The moment his hands were on you, nothing else existed. It is the instinct of the bond. Surely you felt it. Audrey turned to him. I felt it, she admitted softly. But feeling it and acting on it are different. You are a king. I am a rejected female from a minor pack. The council will eat you alive for this. Let them try, Sebastian growled. The car stopped. They were ushered into a private elevator that shot upward at dizzying speed. When the doors opened, they weren't in a home. They were in a fortress of glass and steel. The penthouse was magnificent, overlooking the entire Puget Sound. But it felt cold, lonely. Sit, Sebastian commanded gently, guiding her to a massive velvet sofa. He went to a wet bar, poured a glass of water, and returned. He knelt in front of her, the Alpha King, on his knees. He took her arm, the one Liam had grabbed. 5 distinct bruises were already blooming on her pale skin. Sebastian's jaw tightened. A low rumble vibrated in his chest. I should have killed him. If you had killed him, you would have started a civil war, Audrey said, wincing as he dipped a cloth in cool water and dabbed her arm. Liam has allies, weak ones but loud ones. You speak of politics like a lunar. Sebastian noted his eyes softening. I grew up in the Alpha's house. Remember, I wasn't just scrubbing floors. I was listening. I know how fragile power is. Sebastian paused. He took her hand, pressing his lips to her knuckles. The spark of electricity was gentler this time, a soothing hum that seemed to chase the pain away. You are not fragile, Audrey. You are the strongest person I have ever met. You walked away. Most wolves die of a broken heart when rejected. You built a skyscraper. For the first time that night, Audrey felt tears prick her eyes. I didn't want to die. And now? Sebastian asked, looking up at her. What do you want now? I want to finish my project, she said stubbornly. I want to be Audrey Miller, the architect. Not Audrey Miller, the king's mate. Sebastian smiled. It was a genuine, breathtaking smile that transformed his scary face into something beautiful. Then you shall be both. The elevator dinged. Sebastian's smile vanished instantly. He stood up, placing himself between Audrey and the doors. 3 men walked in. They were old, dressed in old-fashioned gray suits, carrying canes that looked more like weapons. They were the High Council, the governing body that kept the Alpha King in check. Sebastian, the lead elder, a man named Voss with skin like parchment and eyes like flint, barked. We saw the news, a public declaration at a peace summit. Have you lost your mind? I found my mate Voss, Sebastian said coldly. I would expect congratulations. Voss looked past Sebastian, his sneer landing on Audrey. That is the girl from Blackwood, the rejected one. Her name is Audrey, Sebastian warned, his voice dropping an octave. She is damaged goods, Voss shouted, slamming his cane on the marble floor. A wolf rejected by her true mate is unstable. The bond was severed. She cannot hold the power of a queen. She will weaken you. The pack will not respect a Luna who was thrown away by a minor alpha. Audrey stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she forced them to hold her weight. You talk about me as if I am not in the room, Audrey said clearly. Voss looked at her with disdain. Silence, girl. This is a conversation for wolves of rank. I am of rank. Sebastian roared, the room shaking. And I say she speaks. Audrey stepped out from behind Sebastian. She walked until she was face to face with Voss. She was a foot shorter than him, but she didn't back down. You think I am weak because I was rejected, Audrey said. But Liam O'Connor rejected me because he wanted a trophy, not a partner. He wanted someone to look pretty and stay silent. I am neither of those things. Words are wind. Voss spat. If you want to stand beside the king, you must prove you are worthy of the crown. The law of ancients demands a trial. No. Sebastian interrupted immediately. The trials are barbaric. They haven't been used in a century. I forbid it. If you forbid it, Voss smiled slightly, then half the packs in the territory will view her as illegitimate. They will challenge your rule. There will be constant uprisings. Is that what you want for her? A life of looking over her shoulder? Sebastian fell silent. He knew Voss was right. Wolves respected strength above all else. Audrey looked at Sebastian's pained face. She realized then that he couldn't fight this battle for her. If she wanted to be with him, and she realized with a start that she did, she had to earn it. What is the trial? Audrey asked. The trial of the hunt? Voss set his eyes gleaming maliciously. 3 days in the ironwood forest alone. No weapons. You must survive while being hunted by the council's enforcers. If you make it to the northern peak, you are worthy. She is human in her habits, Sebastian argued. She hasn't shifted in 5 years. Then she will die, Voss said simply. And the problem solves itself. Audrey took a deep breath. She thought of Liam's laughing face. She thought of Jessica's pity. She thought of the 5 years she spent hiding in the rain. I accept, Audrey said. Audrey, no. Sebastian grabbed her arm. You don't know what you're saying. She looked at him, her brown eyes fierce. I am done running, Sebastian. If I am to be yours, I will be yours undeniably. Set the date. Voss smiled a shark-smelling blood. 3 days from now. Prepare yourself, little architect. The woods are hungry. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Sebastian was frantic, trying to teach her 5 years of combat training in 48 hours. He tried to give her knives, pepper spray, anything. But the council rules were strict, nothing man-made. But Audrey wasn't focusing on fighting. She was focusing on the terrain. She was an architect. She understood landscapes, structures, and leverage. She spent her nights studying topographic maps of the ironwood forest, memorizing every ravine, every cave, every river. If she couldn't outfight them, she would outthink them. On the afternoon before the trial, Audrey insisted on going to the construction site of Sebastian's estate. It calms me, she told the team of 4 bodyguards Sebastian had assigned to her. I need to see the foundation. The site was located 40 miles outside the city, deep in the foothills. It was a skeletal structure of concrete and rebar, half buried in the earth. Audrey walked through the mud in her boots, checking the load-bearing walls. Miller. Audrey turned. Standing near the edge of the tree, shivering in a thin coat, was Jessica. The bodyguards immediately stepped forward, hands on their holstered weapons. Wait. Audrey signaled them to hold. She walked closer. Jessica looked terrible. Her perfect hair was matted. Her makeup smeared. She had a bruise on her cheek that she had tried to cover with foundation. What do you want, Jessica? Help me. Jessica sobbed quietly. Please. He's lost it. Liam. After the gala, he went crazy. He blames me. He says I made him look weak. He's drinking. He's hitting me. Jessica touched her cheek. I want to leave him. But he has my passport. He has my money. Audrey felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. She knew what Liam was capable of. Go to the police, Jessica, or the council. They won't listen. I'm just a beta female. Jessica reached into her pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. But I have this. It's his ledger. He's been embezzling from the PAC funds, and he's been communicating with the southern rogues plotting against the king. Audrey froze. Treason. If I give this to you, Jessica whispered, you can give it to Sebastian. It will destroy Liam. And in exchange, just get me a plane ticket to Europe. Please, Audrey. You know what it's like to be trapped by him. It was the one hook Jessica knew would work. Shared trauma. Give it to the guards, Audrey said cautiously. I can't, Jessica glanced nervously at the woods. He has watches. If they see me hand it to a guard, they'll know. It has to be you. Just come to the tree. Quick handoff. Please. Audrey looked at the guards. They were scanning the perimeter, but the site was noisy with machinery. Stay here, Audrey told the head guard. I'm just going 10 feet, ma'am, the king said. I see her. She's unarmed and hurt. I'll be 10 seconds. Audrey walked toward the tree. The mud squelched under her boots. Jessica held out the USB drive, her hand shaking. Thank you, Jessica wept. Thank you. Audrey reached out to take the drive. As her fingers brushed the plastic, Jessica's expression changed. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. She gripped Audrey's wrist with surprising strength. "I'm sorry, Audrey," Jessica hissed. "But he promised he'd kill me if I didn't bring you." Before Audrey could scream, a cloth soaked in chemical dampener was pressed over her mouth from behind. Audrey thrashed her eyes going wide. Liam O'Connor stepped out from behind a thick oak tree holding the cloth tight. He looked manic, his eyes wood and bloodshot. "Did you really think I'd let you go to the king?" Liam whispered in her ear as the world began to spin. "You're my mate, and I'm going to fix the mistake I made 5 years ago." Audrey tried to claw at his face, but her limbs felt like lead. The scent of chemicals burned her nose. The guards shouted in the distance. Gunshots rang out, silenced by the roar of the construction equipment. "Sleep now, darling," Liam crooned. "When you wake up, we'll be far away, and by the time the king finds you, I'll have marked you so deep that his scent will never cover mine again." Audrey's vision went black. The last thing she saw was Jessica standing in the mud, weeping silently as she watched them drag Audrey into the darkness of the forest. Sebastian stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He felt a sudden sharp pain in his chest like a thread snapping. He dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor. "Audrey," he gasped. He didn't need a phone call. He didn't need a report. The bond screamed it. She was gone, and the rage that filled him was not human. "Voss!" Sebastian roared, turning to the empty room. "Get the enforcers. Get everyone." He ran to the balcony and vaulted over the railing, shifting in midair. A massive black wolf larger than a bear landed on the street below, cracking the pavement. He threw his head back and let out a howl that shattered windows for 3 city blocks. The king was coming, and this time he would leave no survivors. Consciousness returned to Audrey in waves of pain and cold. The smell of damp earth and rotting wood filled her nose. She opened her heavy eyelids to find herself in a dimly lit cabin. It was rustic old and smelled of long abandoned fires. She tried to move, but her hands were bound behind her back with thick rope tethered to a heavy iron stove. "You're awake." Liam sat in a wooden chair across the room, sharpening a hunting knife. The rhythmic SH sound was the only noise in the cabin. He had changed out of his suit into tactical gear. He looked like the hunter he claimed to be, but his eyes betrayed him. They were frantic, darting around the room, unable to focus. "Where are we, Liam?" Audrey asked, her voice raspy. She tested the ropes. They were tight, but the stove leg she was tied to was rusted. "My grandfather's hunting cabin," Liam said, admiring the blade. "Deep in the North Cascades, no cell service, no scent trails. The river washes everything away." He stood up and walked toward her. "We have time here, Audrey. Time to remember why we were good together." "We were never good together," Audrey said calmly. "I was your servant. You were my master. That isn't love, Liam. That's ownership. And what is the king?" Liam spat, kneeling in front of her. "You think he loves you? He loves the novelty of you. He loves that you defied me. Once he breaks you, he'll discard you. He doesn't want to break me." Audrey looked him in the eye. "He wants to build with me. That's something you never understood about power. It's not about crushing people. It's about lifting them up." Liam growled a low, guttural sound. He reached out and grabbed her jaw, forcing her to look at him. "I am going to mark you, Audrey, tonight, and when I do, the bond with him will shatter. You'll be mine again, and we will go south to Mexico. We'll start a new pack." He leaned in, his teeth elongating, aiming for the mating gland on her neck. Audrey didn't scream. She didn't close her eyes. She looked past him at the floorboards beneath his feet. She was an architect. She knew structures. She knew that in a cabin this old built on a floodplain, the wood rotted from the bottom up. She had seen the way the floor bowed when he walked. "Liam," she said softly. He paused, his breath hot on her neck. "What?" "You're standing on the dry rot." Before he could process the words, Audrey slammed her heels down with all her strength, not onto the floor, but against the rusted leg of the stove she was tied to. The impact was the final straw for the compromised floor joists beneath the heavy iron stove. With a deafening crack, the timber gave way. The floor collapsed. The heavy iron stove plummeted through the rotten wood, dragging Audrey down with it into the crawl space below. Liam, standing on the edge of the fracture, lost his balance and fell backward, his head cracking hard against the stone hearth of the fireplace. Audrey hit the dirt of the crawl space hard. The wind knocked out of her. Dust and debris rained down, but the stove had shattered the old floor joists, and the impact had loosened the rusted leg. She yanked her hands violently. The rope held, but the stove leg snapped. She was free from the anchor. She scrambled through the hole in the floor, coughing in the dust. She climbed out of the crawl space and into the cabin. Liam was on the floor, groaning, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. He was trying to stand his wolf taking over to heal the wound, but he was dazed. Audrey didn't run for the door. She saw his hunting knife on the floor. She grabbed it. She ran for the door, slashing the ropes on her wrists against the blade until they frayed and snapped. She burst out into the night. She was in the middle of a dense forest. The moon was full, casting long skeletal shadows through the pines. She ran. She didn't know where she was going. She just followed the sound of the river. Water washes away scent. Audrey. Liam's roar shook the trees behind her. He was up and he was shifting. She pushed herself harder, branches whipping her face, tearing her clothes. She could hear the heavy thud of paws hitting the earth behind her. He was gaining. A wolf could outrun a human in seconds. She reached a clearing near the riverbank. It was a dead end. A sheer cliff dropped to the raging water below. She spun around the knife in her hand. A massive gray wolf burst through the brush. It was Liam. He was snarling, foam dripping from his jaws. His eyes were pure madness. He crouched, ready to spring. Audrey raised the knife. "Come on then," she screamed, her voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Let's finish this." The gray wolf lunged, but he never reached her. A shadow darker than the night, faster than lightning, slammed into the gray wolf from the side. It was a collision of titans. The impact sounded like a car crash. A gigantic black wolf, easily twice the size of Liam, stood over him. Its fur was like midnight, its eyes burning like molten gold. "Sebastian." Liam's wolf yelped, scrambling to get up, but Sebastian was on him instantly. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Sebastian clamped his jaws onto Liam's shoulder and shook him like a rag doll, throwing him across the clearing. Liam hit a tree with a sickening crunch and slumped to the ground, forced back into his human form by the trauma. Sebastian didn't finish him. He turned his massive head toward Audrey. He huffed, stepping closer, checking her for injuries. He nudged her hand with his wet nose, whining softly. Audrey dropped the knife and buried her hands in his thick fur. "I'm okay," she sobbed. "I'm okay." Suddenly, floodlights blinded them. The thop of helicopters filled the air. Dozens of council enforcers rappelled down from the darkness, weapons drawn. Voss the Elder stepped out from the tree and followed by the rest of the council. They looked at the scene. The Alpha King in his wolf form, the traitorous Liam broken on the ground, and Audrey standing between them covered in hurt and blood holding a knife. Sebastian shifted. The sound of bones rearranging was harsh, but seconds later he stood there in his human form, naked but unashamed, radiating power. He pulled Audrey against his chest, shielding her from the council's gaze. "The hunt is over," Sebastian growled, his voice vibrating with command. Voss looked at Liam, then at Audrey. He saw the fierce determination in her eyes. He saw that she hadn't just survived. She had lured her captor into a trap and stood her ground. "She missed the start of the trial," Voss said, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "This was the trial," Sebastian roared. "She was taken by a rogue Alpha. She escaped his stronghold. She lured him into the open. She survived. Is that not the definition of a lunar strength under fire?" Voss looked at the other elders. They nodded slowly. The law was about survival. Audrey had passed a test far more dangerous than their artificial games. "Agreed." Voss bowed his head slightly. The council recognizes Audrey Miller as the true mate of the king. And he looked at Liam, who was being handcuffed by the enforcers. "We will deal with the traitor." "Wait," Audrey said, stepping away from Sebastian's chest. She walked over to where Liam lay. He looked up at her, one eye swollen shut, his arrogance finally gone, replaced by fear. You said I was weak, Audrey said quietly. You said I was nothing without the pack. Liam coughed, blood splattering his chin. Audrey, I am the architect of my own life, Liam, and you are just a demolition project that ran out of funding. She turned to the enforcers. Take him away. I never want to see him again. She turned back to Sebastian. He was smiling. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated pride. The morning sun hit the glass walls of the new royal estate, casting rainbows across the polished concrete floors. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, strong, defensible, yet filled with light. It was the house Audrey had designed. Audrey stood on the balcony, drinking her coffee, looking out over the territory. She wore a silk robe, and on her finger rested a ring made of black diamond and gold. You're thinking too loud. A voice rumbled behind her. Sebastian wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. He kissed the spot on her neck where his mark now sat a claiming bite that had healed into a silver scar pulsating with their bond. I was thinking about Jessica, Audrey admitted. She's in Europe, Sebastian said, working in a bakery in Lyon. Safe, far away from pack politics. You showed her mercy she didn't deserve. She was a victim too, Audrey said. In her own way, Sebastian turned her around. You changed everything, you know. The council is rewriting the laws on rejection because of you. The packs are listening to the lower ranks. You didn't just build a house, my queen. You rebuilt the kingdom. Audrey smiled, tracing the line of his jaw. I just wanted to be heard. They hear you now, Sebastian whispered, leaning in to kiss her. The whole world hears you. Below them in the courtyard, the pack began to gather for the morning run. When they saw Audrey and Sebastian on the balcony, they didn't cheer. They didn't scream. They bowed, silent, reverent, and loyal. The silence that had once broken her heart was now the sound of her victory. Audrey Miller, the girl who walked away, had finally come home. And that is the story of Audrey and Sebastian. It proves that sometimes the hardest walk you can take is the walk away from the people who don't value you. Audrey didn't just find a better man. She found herself. Liam learned the hard way that you cannot demand respect. You have to earn it. And he lost the most valuable treasure of all because of his ego. What do you think? Did Audrey show too much mercy to Jessica? And would you have forgiven Liam if you were in her shoes? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this with a friend who loves a good romance with a twist. And subscribe with the notification bell turned on so you never miss the next part of our Alpha series. Until next time, keep howling.